Hi, I'm John Nerrell, and welcome to the Mid-Career GPS podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your career and overwhelmed by what steps to take, I can help you. As an executive and career transition coach, I help my clients prepare, position, and promote who they are and what they do to show up and find a job they love or love the job they have. It's time to start building your mid-career GPS. So let's get started. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the podcast. Today is episode number 66, and I'm talking with you about what happens when you have a change in your career plans, but not in your career direction. So I'm looking forward to digging into this topic with you today. This is something that has come up a little bit with some people I'm working with and talking with, and I really felt it important to turn the mic on today, also in part because I'm going through some similar things as well. So I'm going to share that with you a little bit later on. But before we get started, happy November. Can you believe it? So we are 2 months away from the end of the year. Look, if you are looking for a gift for someone for the holidays, I want to invite you to make sure you go over to Amazon to get a copy of my brand new book, Your Mid-Career GPS, 4 Steps to Figuring Out What's Next. And if you are interested in getting that book autographed, reach out to me directly at john@johnnerrell.com, and I will tell you how we can make that happen. So if you're thinking about giving a book to someone you know who is in the process of a career transition and want to give them a wonderful resource, I'd be deeply honored if you would give them a copy of my book for the holidays. Okay. In addition, come on into my private Facebook group, Your Mid-Career GPS. If you have not had a chance to check it out, come on over into Facebook or Meta or whatever it's calling itself nowadays. Come on over in there. Got a wonderful community of like-minded professionals just like yourself, who are all trying to navigate toward whatever is next, whether they're currently in a role that they love and just trying to grow in it, or they're in the process of making that career transition. So would love to have you be a part of that. Now, here's where this topic came about. So I'm recording this on Friday. It's a couple days before Halloween. So October 29th, it is raw and yucky and rainy outside. And if you are feeling a little frustrated or down and you're dealing with weather like this, I don't think that helps. I just don't think it helps at all. And I share that with you because I did a virtual presentation earlier last week. And it was all around the Great Resignation and what it means for your next interview. I had a really nice group of people that showed up for that. And just to be clear, I'm going to be doing that webinar presentation again in a few weeks. So stay tuned. But in prepping for the presentation, I went into one of my old yearbooks. Now, it wasn't my high school yearbook or my college yearbook. It was actually the yearbook from the first year that I taught at Valley Middle School in Oakland, New Jersey. It was actually my second teaching job, but I wanted to pull this for the presentation because had I still been teaching there, this would have been my 25th year teaching there. And I looked at this picture and first thing I thought to myself was like, my gosh, John, you look so young. Right. And I remember being filled with not only a lot of career dreams and ambitions, but there was also a sense of calm. Like I had the job and all I needed to do was just keep doing a good job. Some may think of like, don't screw up, right? But I knew if I just did a really good job, I was going to have a wonderful career there. And in that calm, I had some direction because my plans were in place. Going back to graduate school a few years after I graduated college was certainly a change in my plans, but it didn't shift the direction in which I was headed. Now, as my career progressed, life happened. And that's the thing we have to call out today. Life happens. So during those 14 years, I went through some really bad relationships. I got myself into massive credit card debt. I spent way too much time trying to please people. And ideally, I just lost myself in the whole process. My dad died in my early 30s. My mom died in my early 40s. And in all of that, I fell in love. I met my now husband. And when life grabs you by the heart and tugs on those heartstrings, it's a little difficult not to follow it. And while I had thought for a while that I was just going to stay there, I was also being professionally pulled. And I've shared this in previous episodes where I was teaching a lesson on multiplying fractions. And that voice inside of me was like, dear God, John, you cannot keep doing this for the rest of your life. And when I had those change in plans and I realized I was going to move, it was a move that I never, ever thought I was going to make in my career. And while it wasn't a change in the direction of where my career was progressing, because I was still seeking advancement, I was still looking to level up, there was on some level a change in my plans, where I was going to do it, where I was going to live, who I was going to be with. And so what I want to clear up for you today in this episode is to really help you figure out your career path and to examine whether or not what's happening to you and for you is just a change in plans, but to acknowledge your direction is still clear. So let me take you back for a minute. I want you to go back to when you graduated and think about either when you graduated high school or when you graduated college. You probably had some pressure, maybe self-imposed, maybe imposed by somebody else, that you had to have everything figured out. And in figuring all those things out, there was a weight of responsibility that you knew when you started adulting. I love that phrase, by the way, that when you started adulting, you were going to have to step up with those responsibilities. Maybe you paid rent for the first time. Maybe you took on a mortgage. All of a sudden, there was a utility bill that came to your mailbox with your name on it. You had some fun money. You were able to do stuff. And as your career progressed and your life progressed, maybe your salary was there to be used to help you support your family, right? Or you were able to donate to charities that were important to you, or you were helping to take care of a family member. There was a level of comfort that started to happen in all of the uncomfortableness. I remember when I purchased my second house, and it really was a house that I loved until where I'm at now. But I remember I was following Susie Orman, the financial guru advisor. And bear with me here, because you have to go back to when we were actually writing paper checks and we weren't electronically bill paying, but you'll get the point here. What she recommended was that in the memo line, you write, thank you. That it was an opportunity to give gratitude for you being able to pay your bills. And I did that with whatever check I filled out, my mortgage, my utility bill, whatever it was, I would just write thank you in the memo line. Now, of course, with electronic bill pay, we can't really do that per se, but we can certainly pause to give gratitude for where we're at. And there is a moment right now, wherever you are, whether you're sitting in a chair listening to this, you're on a walk, you're driving, don't get too distracted, please. But just take a moment to be really grateful for where your career has gotten you, because you've shown up and done some pretty wonderful things. What happens, though, is that when we reassess or self-evaluate, we get ourselves into some trouble, or what I like to call a lot of mind drama, is when we think we quote unquote should be somewhere and we're not. Where we should be is usually based upon either some goals that we've set for ourselves that are in conjunction with comparing ourselves to other people. Someone got promoted before you. Someone made six figures before you. Somebody was able to retire in their 30s and you weren't. All of these things that come up in our brain, and we've talked about before how our brain is really defaulted to initially be negative, that it's what gets us caught in thinking about all of these shoulds, right? Remember when you wanted that first leadership role or increased responsibility? You wanted that title of manager or team leader. There was some kind of motivator for you that was pushing you or propelling you to get that advancement. And in getting that increase in role or responsibility, there was probably a little more money, a better title, greater ownership over some certain tasks. And you also believed, if not knew, that you could do the job better than anyone else. And when you got that promotion, you were right. I mean, let's face it, you're not going to say you were wrong all the time. It's not until afterwards when we can reevaluate whether that was a good move or a bad move. But in the moment, we make the best decisions we can because we acknowledge where we are in those moments. In looking for advancement and leveling up your career, you do everything you can do to advance. So now that you're there, what's next? This often happens for people who are considered hypos, high performers or high potentials, where they're tagged by an organization for doing really, really good work at an entry level or once they come into the organization, and then they're promoted. And one of the things where I have seen it happen practically everywhere I have worked is that if we advance someone and we don't put the proper supports in place, it's very easy for them to get frustrated and disenfranchised because all of a sudden it's difficult. They're uncertain about how to manage someone. They're uncertain how to lead a particular project. They're uncertain about delivering feedback. And so now when it gets difficult as humans, we have to fight or we flight. And you can go back and think about your career path and think about, when were you willing to fight for where you were? And when was it the better move for you to take flight and just leave? I am not saying one is better than the other because there are certainly times where fighting is more advantageous for your career and other times when taking flight is more advantageous, especially if you are in a toxic work situation and for your own mental health and well-being, you need to get out, right? But in thinking about those early advancements, what did that mean to you? What did that mean when you thought about where your career was headed? Are you the kind of professional where you chart everything out in a spreadsheet and you have a plan and you execute it flawlessly? Or are you the kind of person where you have some ideas in mind about where you're going and you wait for those things to happen? Both can be effective and both can also lead to a lot of disappointment. Think about the person who has tried to level up in their career and they have gone for multiple internal opportunities only to be told no. And they take a step back and they wonder, what else do I have to do? What is next? What is my next move that is going to allow me to finally get the blessing, the nod, the yes that allows me to level up? If we're so attached to that plan and we say, by the time I am 36, I'm going to be senior manager. And by the time I am 40, I'm going to be director. And by the time I'm 43, I'm going to be senior director. And then I'm going to be VP. If we start charting all those things out and we don't start meeting the timeline, it can obviously lead to that mind drama or disappointment that I was talking about before. Because even the best laid plans aren't executable, or they may be executable. I don't even know if that's a word, right? But you can go ahead and execute them, but do you still get the results? There are times along our career path that we hit roadblocks. In my book, I talk a little bit about this in terms of detours, but they could be personal. Maybe you had a health issue. Maybe you had a relationship concern that needed your attention. Maybe you had to take care of a sick relative, a sick parent. There are personal reasons as well as professional reasons. You worked for a boss where they weren't as supportive, or they weren't advocating for your career in the same way you were. And you tried to find a workaround, but it was obviously challenging and difficult. There may be organizational roadblocks where you want to advance and you're ready to advance, but on the organizational chart, there is no room for you to move. There isn't a space open or a seat at the table for you. And when these things happen, we have to take a step back and say, well, how well do I handle those situations? How well do I navigate those roadblocks? And how much are these things also impacting your work-life balance? In this webinar that I facilitated last week, we talked a lot about how the Great Resignation has impacted what your work-life balance is. And I did a podcast episode on this just a few episodes before this one that I'm encouraging you to go back and check out as well. But it is an awakening and a reevaluation of what is important to us in our careers. When we think about leveling up, we think about the title. As we get older, we start evaluating whether or not we want that responsibility. Leveling up may not provide you with the change of life money that is either important or necessary for you. And you sit there and you say to yourself, look, I'm okay doing what I'm doing. And for another $10,000, $15,000 a year, it's just not worth it to me. I don't want the stress. Those are the things that as you see your career path progress, we also reevaluate where it is headed and the direction that it is taking. What do you do if you are feeling stuck or unfulfilled in your job? Because that's a pretty awful feeling, where you get up every morning and you loathe going to work and you wonder where your impact is and you want something more, but you're just unsure of how to do it. We make changes when the barometer or the meter on our motivation gets to be so high that we can't stay where we currently are. I remember experiencing this in my teaching career, because as much as I loved where I was still looking for an opportunity to level up. I was looking for a department chair. I was looking for, district coordinator type positions. And I wasn't sure that was really going to be where I was. But there was another component that I wanted: supervisory responsibilities. I wanted to be the person that had some administrative authority to really help impact the change that I wanted to in my department. And that, for one, was not available to me where I was. It just was not part of the position. So I had been looking. And then, of course, when life happened and I met Richard and we decided to move together after dating long distance for 2 years, I never thought I would move to Washington, D.C. I liked living in New Jersey, but that's where life happens, right? So I was still looking for those administrative responsibilities. The direction was still there. The path that I was going to take was something completely different. Now, when I did come to DC, I did level up. I did get that administrative type position, and I really enjoyed that job. And it set me up for the next few moves that I made career-wise until I opened my coaching practice full time. but I never gave up on the direction that it was still to advance, to improve, to challenge, to make a greater impact, to level up. It's just, I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like. It's also part of what you do when you are looking for a job and you start shopping to see if a job feels more appealing or interesting to you. When the reality is, you need to be thinking about your skills and experience and talents and where you're going to leverage those to help somebody solve their problems. Your talents are going to be that solution or that necessary asset that that organization needs in order to make them better because of you being there. Now, this is also not about letting go of our dreams. While the path may be different, the direction is not. When we make career moves, we have to assess risk. And depending on who you are as a risk taker, you're always going to weigh out the benefits, the pains, the gains, and the rewards. And in thinking about that risk, and you try to mitigate that risk as much as possible, you're always assessing what that means for your overall plan. How does the direction that you are headed still help you achieve that plan that you had when you were younger? Now, this hits home for me in some very specific ways because I've been going through a lot of this actually with my coaching practice. And I'm in a stage of growth, but I am not at the growth level that I had thought I would be at the end of year 4. And in doing so and acknowledging that as I've been working with my coach is really been this reevaluation of saying, let's just slow down a little bit. Let's not push the bar so fast and let's just stay where we are. In a lot of ways, what I'm doing is trying to equate this to you just need a little more time in your role. But in saying that to myself and in working with my coach on this, we're getting very, very clear on the specific targets that I need to hit to demonstrate that growth as I focus on that in year 5. Now, there is going to be an opportunity for you to help me with all of this. So stay tuned because I'm going to be sharing some things where you're going to be able to give me some feedback and participate in ways you can help me improve year 2 of this podcast, for example. So I'll have that for you shortly in a couple of episodes. So stay tuned on that. But just because I'm a business owner and an entrepreneur and I get to make my own schedule does not mean that I don't have growing pains or frustrations or challenges in my business. I am very grateful for where my business is at. And as a high achiever, I always am looking for what's more. Right? So yes, I have to do a lot of work sometimes where I don't always see the glass as full as it always is. But that's been something that's been a part of my life ever since I was younger. It's just that I'm older. I now learn to deal with it a little bit differently. So yes, my business plans are going to change a little bit. It's not changing my direction. I am still full steam ahead in moving forward. It just might take me another year or so to get there where I want. Those are the things that happen in our careers. And as much as I'm helping you build your mid-career GPS to prepare, position, and promote who you are and what you do, so you can show up to find the job you love or love the job you have, I have my own GPS as well. And I look at it constantly. And I look at it and evaluate it and reassess and look at what the risk is and figure out my next moves. But I never, ever question the direction. It's just the plans might change a little bit along the way, but I'm very, very clear on where I am headed. And that is for you in where you are headed. So I want to wrap up this podcast by sharing this tip with you. And it comes out of what we had talked about in the Great Resignation webinar that I want to share with you here. When it comes time for you when you're interviewing and you're asked questions by the hiring manager or the interviewer, I want you to pick really, really good questions that you want to have answered. These are questions that you're curious about, you're intrigued by, you want to learn a little bit more about. And they're not those frequently asked questions that the majority of candidates will typically ask. What's a typical day like? Ugh, please don't ever ask that question. It's not the time or place in the interview, right? I want you to get curious. Look at the job posting. Look at the organization. Look at what people have on LinkedIn. I want you to ask the things that are motivating to you, inspiring for you, and are directly connected to your unique professional value that you want to know about so you can go in and you have an idea for you to assess fit as to whether or not that next job is in line with the direction and your career path that you've been working so hard at. Basically, ask better questions. Ask questions that are reflective of who you are and what you do and what you're interested in. So you can learn a little bit more if that's really a fit for you in whatever's going to be next. Now, we recently just asked a question around this in my private Facebook group, and these are the kind of things that happen in there. So if you're not part of the Facebook group, come on in, search for Your Mid-Career GPS on Facebook, answer the membership questions. Would love to have you be a part of it. Do me a favor, if you know someone that would benefit from this episode, kindly share it with them. Tell them about this podcast and all the great things we've been doing here to really help you build your mid-career GPS so you can figure out whatever is next. And drop me a comment either on social at John Narroll Coaching, connect with me on LinkedIn, email me at john@johnnarroll.com about what you liked about this episode, what resonated with you. And remember, my friends, how we show up matters. And we build our GPSs 1 mile or 1 step at a time. All right. I will be back with you next week. Until then, stay safe, be well, make it a great rest of your day. If you enjoyed today's episode and don't want to miss another one, follow on Apple Podcasts or wherever you usually listen, and kindly remember to rate and review. Visit johnnarroll.com to download your free job search tracker and other free mid-career GPS resources right there on my homepage so you can start building your mid-career GPS. Come join my private Facebook group at Your Mid-Career GPS and join an amazing community of people like you who are all working to figure out whatever is next for themselves and their careers. And don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on social at John Narroll Coaching. I'll see you next time.